They say grief makes people quieter. In my case, it made me build. When my husband, Captain Mark Collins, passed away, I built a small memorial in our front yard, a simple flagpole, a wooden bench, and his framed military uniform inside a glass case. It wasn't much, but it gave me something to wake up to. A place where our daughter, Emily, could leave flowers for the father she barely remembered. Most of the neighbors understood. They'd wave when they saw me tending to the memorial, polishing the glass or replacing the flag every few weeks. Everyone respected it, everyone except Karen. Karen was the HOA president, late 50s, always dressed like she was heading to a board meeting with a smile so sharp it could cut glass. She believed in visual harmony and neighborhood standards, which was her way of saying everything should look like she wants it to. The first confrontation happened on a quiet Sunday morning. I was sitting on the bench under the flagpole when she walked up, clipboard in hand. "Mrs. Collins," she began, not even bothering with a hello. "We've received complaints about your—" She paused dramatically. "Display." I looked at her, confused. "You mean my husband's memorial?" She pursed her lips. "It's not about what it means, it's about how it looks. The HOA guidelines clearly state that all front yards must maintain a uniform appearance." I stared at her for a long moment, my hands tightening around the edge of the bench. "That's my husband's uniform in there, Karen. He died serving this country. This is his resting place." She gave a small sigh, as if I were being unreasonable. "I understand your sentiment, but the rules are the rules. You could move it to the backyard. Out of sight, out of sight." I didn't answer her. I just stood up, turned away, and walked back into the house before I said something I'd regret. That evening, I found a printed notice taped to my front door. Violation of HOA aesthetics clause. Immediate compliance required. Her signature was stamped at the bottom in neat, smug handwriting. I tore it down and threw it straight in the trash. A week passed, then 2. The neighborhood went quiet whenever I stepped outside. Karen's gossip spread fast. How emotional I was being, how I refused to cooperate, but I didn't care. I wasn't moving that memorial. One afternoon, I caught her standing near the edge of my yard with her phone out, snapping pictures. I opened the door and called out, "Need a better angle?" She flinched, then straightened her posture. "Documenting violations, Mrs. Collins. It's my duty." I walked down the porch steps slowly, meeting her eye. "Do your duty somewhere else." For a second, she hesitated, then turned and left. But the smirk on her face stayed burned in my mind. That night, I couldn't sleep. The wind howled outside, and every creak of the house made me wonder if she was out there, plotting her next move. The next morning, something felt wrong. I walked out to water the flowers by the memorial and froze. The flag was gone. The pole was bare, the flowers scattered, and the frame holding Mark's medals had been shattered. I dropped to my knees. My hands trembled as I picked up the broken glass. Every instinct screamed it was her, but there were no cameras, no witnesses, just a mess that felt like a message. I reported it to the HOA. They brushed me off. "We have no proof it was anyone from the board," they said. Karen sat at the end of the table, pretending to check her phone. Days passed. I replaced everything. New flowers, new frame, a new flag. I refused to let her win, but Karen wasn't finished. She started sending more letters, each one nastier than the last. "Remove the structure or face a fine. Failure to comply may result in property liens." The final one said, "This is your last warning. It wasn't just about rules anymore. It was about control." That night, as I locked the door, I saw her across the street, wine glass in hand, porch light casting her shadow over the sidewalk. She was smiling at me. I knew then something bad was coming, and I was right. Because 2 nights later, I woke up to the sound of crackling. Not thunder, not wind, but fire. When I ran outside, my heart stopped. The memorial was in flames. The flag, the frame, the uniform, everything Mark had left behind, burning in front of me. I screamed for help, grabbed the garden hose, but it was useless. The fire spread too fast. Neighbors rushed out, shouting, calling 911, but all I could do was watch. Through the haze of smoke, I saw her, standing at the edge of her driveway, still holding that wine glass. The firelight flickered across her face. She didn't look shocked. She looked satisfied. By the time the fire truck arrived, it was over. Everything was ash. The next morning, the HOA posted a public message on their site. We regret the unfortunate incident at Mrs. Collins's property. Please ensure outdoor decorations are safely secured to prevent hazards. Hazards. That's what they called it. But I knew better. I could see it in her eyes that night. The glint of victory. What she didn't know was that I had just ordered a set of new security cameras the day before. They were arriving that afternoon, too late for the memorial, but just in time for karma. The next morning, the smell of smoke still lingered in the air, clinging to everything. The porch railings, my hair, even the soil under the charred grass. I sat on the steps with a mug of coffee that had long gone cold, staring at the blackened spot where Mark's memorial used to be. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the flames again, the way they devoured the flag, the way his metals clinked and fell apart in the heat. And I saw her standing there watching. I kept telling myself there'd be justice, that someone must have seen something. But when the fire investigator came by that afternoon, his tone was polite but distant. There's no evidence of accelerants, he said, flipping through his clipboard. Could have been a short circuit. Maybe a candle? There was no candle, I said flatly. He nodded like he'd heard that 1,000 times before. Well, if anything comes up, we'll let you know. They didn't even take a proper report. Just a shrug, a signature, and a goodbye. That evening, the cameras arrived. 4 small black domes with night vision and cloud backup. I didn't wait. I installed them myself before the sun went down, every corner covered. Porch, yard, side alley, driveway. When I looked up at the blinking red lights, I made a silent promise. You took his memory from me, Karen, I whispered. But you're not taking my peace. Over the next few days, she avoided me, or pretended to. I saw her jogging past my house every morning with that smug grin, waving to neighbors as if nothing had happened. But every time she got close, she'd glance at the burned patch in my yard, just long enough to remind me she'd won. Then came the letter, folded neatly in my mailbox, no stamp, no envelope. Just one sheet of paper that read, "Remove all remnants of your memorial. It violates HOA Code 3.1a. Final notice." My hands shook. She wasn't even trying to hide anymore. That night, I called a friend of Mark's from his old unit, Sergeant Lewis. He'd been like a brother to him. When he heard what happened, his voice went cold. "Send me her name," he said. "I'll make sure this doesn't get buried." I didn't know what he meant, but I trusted him. The next morning, a black SUV pulled up in front of Karen's house. 2 men stepped out in military dress blues. They weren't there to intimidate. They were there to deliver a folded flag. Mark's brothers-in-arms had heard about the fire. They stood silently on her porch as she opened the door, confusion flickering across her face. "This is for Mrs. Collins," one of them said. "In honor of Captain Collins, whose service should never have been disrespected." Karen froze. Neighbors came out to watch. Cameras rolled. Her perfect little street turned into a public reckoning. She mumbled something about a misunderstanding, but it was too late. The story had already spread. Later that evening, as I watched from my window, she stormed outside and began yelling at a neighbor, accusing them of spreading lies and defamation. The same woman who'd called my memorial an eyesore was now panicking because her image was cracking. But her biggest mistake came a few nights later. It was around midnight. I was watching the footage from my new cameras on my laptop, just to make sure they worked. That's when I saw it, a figure in a hoodie creeping along the sidewalk. She thought she was being clever this time. I zoomed in. It was her. She crouched near the burned patch, flashlight in one hand, something shiny in the other. I turned up the volume. Through the static, I heard her muttering, "I'll make sure there's nothing left for her to rebuild." She started digging. Right where the ashes were. My pulse quickened. I hit record on my phone, capturing the live feed. Then headlights flashed across her yard. A passing car. She froze, looked up, and bolted. The next morning, I filed a report with the footage attached. This time, the tone of the investigator was very different. He watched the video twice, then looked at me. That's your HOA president? Yes, I said quietly. He nodded. We'll handle it. And they did. Just not fast enough for her. Because by the end of that week, Karma showed up at her door wearing a different uniform. A state fire marshal visited her home, followed by 2 insurance adjusters. Turns out she'd filed an insurance claim for fire damage, sustained due to neighboring negligence. She claimed my memorial fire had spread to her property. Only the footage told a different story. Within 24 hours, she was facing charges for insurance fraud and trespassing. Still, she tried to play the victim, sent out emails to the entire HOA blaming me for harassment, claiming I was manipulating military connections for sympathy. But her words didn't matter anymore. The neighborhood had seen the footage. The same people who once gossiped behind my back now crossed the street to apologize. I rebuilt the memorial again, this time with stone instead of wood, and this time under the protection of every eye in the neighborhood. But I wasn't finished, because Karen hadn't just burned my husband's memory. She'd burned her reputation, and she didn't even know it yet. The following week felt eerily quiet. No gossip, no letters, no friendly HOA reminders tucked under my door. Karen had vanished from the neighborhood radar, but I knew better. People like her don't disappear. They hide and wait until they can rewrite the story. I spent my mornings sitting by the new memorial, the one built from gray stone and brass instead of wood and glass. The flag fluttered softly, catching the light just right. Mark would have liked that. Emily, my daughter, came outside one afternoon with a crayon drawing of her dad in uniform. "Can we put this here, Mom?" she asked. I nodded and slipped it under the new glass panel, right beside his folded flag. For the first time in weeks, I smiled without forcing it. Then my phone buzzed. An email, subject, HOA emergency meeting. Tonight at 6 p.m. Karen's name was on it. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Whatever she had planned, she wasn't done yet. When I arrived at the community hall that evening, the room was full. The air was thick with tension and whispers. Karen sat at the head table in her usual seat, tailored blazer, pearl necklace, the picture of false composure. She looked up as I walked in, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Mrs. Collins," she said in that saccharine tone that always made my stomach turn. "We're so glad you could join us. Please have a seat." I didn't move. I didn't get much of a choice, did I? Her lips twitched. "This meeting concerns false accusations made against the HOA leadership." "Some very serious ones," the crowd murmured. I noticed several board members looking uncomfortable. She was still pretending she had control. Karen cleared her throat and held up a few papers. "Certain parties have been spreading misinformation about me, about the fire, about insurance matters, even about supposed video footage. I'd like to clear the record tonight." Her voice trembled just enough to seem rehearsed. Before she could continue, a man in a gray suit stepped forward from the back of the room. He wasn't one of us. I recognized him immediately. State Fire Marshal. He set a small black folder on the table in front of her. "Actually, Mrs. Parker," he said firmly, "we'll be the ones clarifying things tonight." The room went silent. Karen blinked, her confidence flickering. The marshal continued. "Following your insurance claim, our department reviewed the footage provided by Mrs. Collins. It clearly shows you on her property after midnight, tampering with debris from the fire. You also filed a fraudulent claim stating your fence was damaged, which the video disproves." Karen's face drained of color. That's absurd. That video is doctored." He ignored her and turned to the board. "We've forwarded the report to local authorities for prosecution. She's facing charges for arson-related tampering, insurance fraud, and violation of homeowner privacy laws." For a moment, no one breathed. Then someone in the audience whispered, "She really did it." Karen's voice rose, desperate now. "You're all fools. I've run this neighborhood for 15 years. You think you can just—" Before she could finish, 2 deputies stepped through the side doors. One of them quietly said, "Ma'am, you'll need to come with us." She tried to pull away, shouting about conspiracies and military pity campaigns. But the more she spoke, the smaller she seemed. They let her out past me. For the first time since this all began, she met my eyes. And there was fear there, not rage. Just fear. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The meeting dissolved into stunned chatter. The HOA vice president took the microphone and cleared his throat awkwardly. Effective immediately, Karen Parker has been suspended from all duties. A new election will be held next week. He looked at me and nodded. Mrs. Collins, on behalf of the community, we're deeply sorry. I just nodded back. Words didn't matter anymore. A few weeks later, the story made local news. HOA president arrested for burning veterans memorial. It spread fast, faster than any rumor Karen had ever started. Neighbors began to stop by, leaving flowers and small flags at the base of the new memorial. Emily would hand each one a thank you card she'd made herself. Even people from other neighborhoods drove by to salute. One morning, as I was tidying the flower beds, the mailman approached with a small package. "Came from the base, ma'am," he said softly. Inside was a folded American flag and a note signed by Mark's old unit. "In honor of Captain Collins, whose service and sacrifice will never fade. And to the wife who kept his memory alive." I stood there for a long while, holding that flag, the morning sun warming my face. For the first time in months, I didn't feel the weight of anger or grief, just quiet peace. Karen eventually lost her home. The HOA revoked her membership, and she moved out of state. Last I heard, she tried to start over somewhere else. But news follows you when you burn bridges and uniforms. Sometimes, at dusk, when the flag catches the light and ripples just right, I swear I can feel Mark beside me again. He doesn't say anything. He doesn't have to, because the fire that took his uniform didn't destroy his memory. It reignited it, and this time, it burned brighter than ever.